I'm trying to get into more frequent recordings and tutorials, and to help with that I'm going to try and cover some topics that aren't necessarily WordPress related. In a couple of weeks' time I'm going to be doing a talk at a meetup about the hidden world of development tools that are tucked away inside your web browser. And if you're a web developer, you'll probably already know about these. And if you're not, or if you're a beginner web developer, then you'll probably find this really helpful and useful and learn plenty of stuff from it. But if you are an advanced web developer, then you may find something of interest here too. And I'll try and cover some of the more advanced things that you can do with developer tools. Throughout this, I'm using Google Chrome, and there are equivalent tools built into other browsers such as Microsoft Internet Explorer, Microsoft Edge, Safari and Firefox, but I'm going to be focusing on the tools that are available inside Google Chrome because they're the tools that I'm most familiar with. So here I am looking at the BBC News website today. There's some storms in Ireland and plenty of other news going on today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click somewhere on the page, and there's this pop-up menu, and one of the items is inspect. So this is one way that we can get into developer tools. There is actually a keyboard shortcut which on my Mac is Command Option I, or you can go to view and developer, and then you can open one of these here, but probably the middle one, developer tools, is the one that you'll reach for most. So let's start with this inspect. Let's right click and go inspect. And this opens up at the bottom of my screen a new panel that contains on the left hand side the source code and on the right hand side the CSS. And what it's actually done is it's highlighted the item that I've right clicked. So if I scroll this, let's just fix the sizes a little. I can drag these around. So you'll see this blue highlighted item is highlighted up above as the item that I clicked on, that live Hurricane Ophelia panel that is highlighted in blue. And you'll see as I move between the elements in the panel in the bottom left that the highlighting in the top panel changes to show me the HTML element that I'm currently hovering over in the code. We'll come back and talk about this another time, but I want to look at something else today, and that is that there is the ability inside DevTools to show your website in responsive mode in a variety of different shapes and sizes so that you can do responsive testing. This is actually turned on at the moment. I think by default it's turned off when you open DevTools. So this button here, this little picture of some mobile devices, is the toggle, and you'll see when I turn that off, I go back to a full screen view, and when I turn it on, I go back into responsive view. It's worth pointing out at this point that this isn't ever going to be a true reflection of what your web page will look like on any given mobile device. It will come close, but whenever you're looking at a page inside Google Chrome, you are using Google Chrome to draw that page on your screen. And Chrome and Safari and Firefox and the Microsoft browsers, they will draw web pages differently sometimes. So it's not great for debugging a device specific issue, but it does give you a fairly good overview of how your website will look on various different size screens. So let's have a look at what we can do here. We can, it's actually better, see these three little dots here. If I'm doing responsive testing, it's actually better to choose to dock to the right. So if I click that, then that puts my inspection panel on the right hand side with the code at the top and the styles at the bottom. And then over on the left hand side is my web page. Now I'm in responsive mode. I can drop down and actually see various different devices, but I'll leave it in responsive mode for now. And that allows me to drag the side to make it narrower and the bottom to make it shallower or deeper. So I can control the size of what's called the viewport, and I can see how my website looks at various different screen sizes. And you'll notice that we collapsed down to two tabs here and a drop down menu. And if I expand, you'll see it redraws. So we've now got a label on that menu item, and as I get further wider, you'll see we kind of snap to a more desktop kind of view with the menu displayed. So this is great. This allows us to responsively test our website on a variety of different screen sizes. Now what you can do is you can fake a specific device. So I can fake an iPhone 5, for example. And I've actually got a neat little option here you can hide the device frame or show the device frame. So if I take that off, it just gives me a viewport. But if I'm taking screenshots or something, it's nice to be able to show the device wrapped around it. So this is giving me an iPhone 5, and the dimensions of my viewport here are 320 by 568. I'm zoomed out to 75%. I can zoom that back in, but that doesn't now fit on my screen. So it's been clever enough to say this device isn't going to fit inside my screen here, so it's zoomed out for me. I can, because I've got a device selected, I can't change these values, but you can change the device pixel ratio, as it's called here, which is basically the density of the pixels. So you can make it high res or a low resolution device, and then you can choose how to interact with it, and you can even throttle the network. So I can choose to simulate being on a low end mobile network or a mid-tier mobile network, and I can rotate my device as well, which is kind of handy, and that's zoomed me back into 100% because that fits on my screen. So I can pretend to be an iPhone 6 Plus, which is bigger. It's now zoomed me out to 50%. I can choose to be an iPad, and again I can rotate that and it zoomed me out. And then what you'll notice is, because this is a mobile device, let's switch back to say iPhone 6, I can actually click and drag this as well, which is really handy. So I can actually simulate a touch movement on the screen. And as I tap and hold, I don't get the iOS menu because I'm not actually on an iOS device. But you'll see it simulates a touch and hold on the screen when I do that. There are some other things that you can do with this that I'm not going to go into the details of, but if you're in responsive mode, you'll see that you can control the zoom of this, and you can control this device pixel ratio, so you can make it super high resolution or revert back to a standard resolution. You can choose different interaction types, and you can choose to be completely offline or change your network, as I mentioned before. You can also reset to defaults, and these things are really great. You can capture a screenshot at the current size, or you can capture a full-size screenshot which will actually scroll down the page, and it will record the whole length of the page rather than just the bit that you're seeing. So this is a really handy function. It only appears when you've got the responsive mode turned on in DevTools, but you can actually capture the full length of a page for a screen grab, which is really, really handy, and something that you'd otherwise need a browser extension to do. So just quickly, a couple of other things that are useful to know about in here that can help you when you're testing out your websites. Over next to the X to close the inspector is this little drop down menu, and if I click on that, you can do this thing called Show Console Drawer. If I click Show Console Drawer, that puts up some additional options down at the bottom. One of the things I can do here is I can emulate CSS media, so I can choose to actually view my print style sheet or my screen style sheet, so I can test my print styles as well. And then in here there's a load of other options. So if I want to actually simulate some specific network conditions, I can disable cache, I can do network throttling using some presets here, or I can add my own presets which allow me to give me some very specific control. Or if you know what a user agent is, this is how your browser identifies itself to the web server you're getting a page from. I can turn this off, and I can actually choose to tell the server that I am Firefox on an iPhone, or Googlebot or Internet Explorer or whatever that thing is, and see if the server responds differently when I'm sending that user agent. So these are things to be aware of. And it's worth noting that in DevTools, with DevTools open, disable cache is normally enabled by default. So as soon as you open this panel up, any caching that is going on will not happen. And I'll come back and talk about the network panel in a future video, and we'll see why that's important for debugging stuff that's happening on the network and with your page load. So hopefully that's been useful, an introduction to how you can use these DevTools and this inspector to test out your website in a mobile context and see how it looks. Remember that this is not actually testing it on a mobile device. It gives you a good guide, but it's not a full substitute for actually testing on a couple of mobile devices to make sure your website looks right on a real Android or a real iOS or a real Windows mobile device. It's good if you're doing testing to acquire these devices or friends who have them, so that you can test these things out on the real mobile devices. I'm going to come back and talk more about the inspector and what you can do with it in future videos. So hope this is useful, and thanks for watching.